So I've been reading the letters of Vincent van Gogh and I've been thinking a lot about so pretty. Anyway, and I've been thinking a lot about the intersection of making art, being an artist, but also struggling with mental illness, being neurodivergent, and also working a 9 to 5 or working a corporate job. And his letters pretty much lie at that intersection, at least the part that I've read so far. So yeah, I thought I would share my thoughts and quotes from these letters with you. So let's get started. The first sort of quote that I have for you is from a letter Van Gogh wrote to his brother Theo in 1879. I have had similar discussions before, plans for improvement and change and generating energy. And yet I am a little frightened by them, not least because I have sometimes acted upon them only to have my hopes dashed. Change for the better in my life, shouldn't I long for that? Or are there times when one has no need for betterment? I hope I do become much improved, but precisely because that is what I long for, I am afraid of cures worse than the disease. Can you blame a patient for standing up to his doctor and preferring not to be given the wrong treatment or quack remedies? So basically, the context of this letter is that every time I'm looking at my laptop, these are what my notes are. So the context of this letter is that Van Gogh wrote this letter at a time when he was really struggling to find a job and he was really struggling with his mental health and he hadn't quite yet realized that he wanted to make art. So there were like a lot of different things he was interested in: art and reading and books and paintings, but also religion. He, from what I can tell, was struggling severely with his mental health issues and the kinds of waves, the ups and downs you go through when you are struggling with a mental illness, because that does affect your mood, energy, motivation. So at this time, Van Gogh's family was pressurizing him a lot to like find consistency and just find one career path and stick with it. And so Van Gogh writes this letter to kind of explain to his brother why he's not able to do that. And I think that this is so relatable even now, even like, I don't know, a century and a half later, because we are still prescribed. So when Van Gogh talks about he's afraid of cures worse than the disease, so the cure that's prescribed to him is just find a job, just find a career path and stick to that. And that is so often what's prescribed to us as well. Even now, we are prescribed busyness as a cure, as a solution for everything. And it is well intentioned because our loved ones, I guess, want to see us happy and secure, and you need money to live and to make a life for yourself. So financial security is kind of seen as the number one thing. But I often think about how any sort of deviation from a traditional path, or like any sort of break to just feed your curiosity and figure out what it is you want to do outside of your work life and who you are outside of your work life, any sort of wandering, any sort of pause is just seen as something to be fixed or something to be pitied. You then become someone who has to be put on the right track again, which is the right track towards a stable career again. As though life were like this simple puzzle that if you just slot in the pieces of like work and job and family, then everything's just golden and you're fixed and nothing's ever going to go wrong again. It can be beautiful and frustrating at sometimes, but also like really rewarding and meaningful when you take the time, take the break from a corporate job or from your busy life, hectic work schedules, to figure out what it is that you want to do and be okay with uncertainty, be okay with not having the answers and not trying to resist that, because you'll figure out so much of yourself in the process, whether that means quitting your job and like doing the thing that you've always loved and you've always dreamt about, or if you haven't figure out what it is you want to do, then taking a class or reading up more on what it is you're interested in: baking, painting, writing, making a film, whatever. But I think especially if you're someone who struggles with mental illness and you're also an artist, but you have to like work a 9 to 5, there's just something from the inside that just like rebels against that structure and that system and that whole culture, work culture of pretending and wearing a mask constantly, even in the way that you speak to each other at work. It's not enough, because that's not, the workplace is not what defines you. But then there's the struggle because you haven't yet figured out what does define you. But all the while there's something inside of you that's just going like, this system is not set up for me and it feels more like a cage right now. And I say especially for neurodivergent people, because like I mentioned earlier, our mood and motivation and energy fluctuate constantly, and there are so many low waves that we go through, and a rigid capitalist system is not structured to account for that, or to account for your bouts of creativity, your bouts of energy, but then also these severe dips in your mood and motivation. So Van Gogh, in the same letter he's writing, so now one of the reasons why I have no regular job and why I have not had a regular job for years is quite simply that my ideas differ from those of the gentlemen who hand out the jobs to individuals who think as they do. It is not just a question of my appearance. It goes deeper, I do assure you. So this is when Theo, his brother, and Van Gogh haven't spoken for like a year. So Van Gogh is thanking Theo for basically giving him some money because Van Gogh was really poor at the time and he didn't have enough to support himself. But he's explaining to Theo that he does miss him, but he's also trying to answer some of the questions that the family has had about him, about who he is and why he is the way that he is. What has changed is that my life was then less difficult and my future seemingly less gloomy. But as far as my inner self, my way of looking at things and of thinking is concerned, that has not changed. But if there has indeed been a change, then it is that I think, believe, and love more seriously now what I thought, believed, and loved even then. So he's grown even more in his love of just in his capacity to love, whether that's art or books or paintings or religion, the parts of it that seemed beautiful to him back then. He says that, and he's talking about art, there's a reality in art, in a manner of speaking. There is a reality more real than reality itself. Something hitherto unknown, if only you can read it, will tell you untold things. So please don't think that I am renouncing anything. I am reasonably faithful in my unfaithfulness. And I love that line, I'm reasonably faithful in my unfaithfulness. And although I have changed, I am still the same. And what preys on my mind is simply this one question: what am I good for? Could I not be of service or use in some way? How can I become more knowledgeable and study some subject or other in depth? So I think this is also a common thread with NDs, with neurodivergent people, that we love so many things and we get attached to novelty and variety, and oftentimes that is actually most of the time that doesn't work out for us because it means struggling with a lot of different career paths and constantly switching to and fro, and it does frustrate your loved ones as well and the people who are generally looking out for you because they want to see you happy, but they want to see you stable as well. But then you yourself have so much to give and so much to offer, and it kind of keeps getting split between different things. And so you can't figure out what's that one thing, and you often long for this one thing that will keep you sated and will bring you peace and will bring you clarity, like, okay, I found it, this is like that one thing. And while that may be true, and I think that obviously I can't generalize, that might be true for a lot of people, I think that I'm kind of coming to peace with the fact that that's not me, at least, and that might not ever be me, that my attention and love might always be split into different avenues. And there could also be phases of life where for years on end I could maybe write, and then for years on end I could maybe act, for years on end I could do something else that hasn't crossed my mind yet, maybe music again. But obviously this is very easy to say when you have the kind of social support that most people lack, the kind of financial support that most people lack. And Van Gogh lacked both of those things. And for him to, in these letters, still have the kind of outlook that he had, the kind of love and joy that he had, that he always had, for the things he found beauty and meaning in, and for his brother, his family, I think is really beautiful. So there's something else. This is the same letter. It's a long ass letter, but I think he tries to explain who he is and why he is the way that he is so well in this letter. So he says, the there is a kind of ne'er do well, who is inwardly consumed by a great longing for action, who does nothing because his hands are tied, because he is, so to speak, imprisoned somewhere, because he lacks what he needs to be productive, because disastrous circumstances have brought him forcibly to this end. Such a one does not always know what he can do, but he nevertheless instinctively feels, I am good for something. My existence is not without reason. I know that I could be a quite different person. How can I be of use? How can I be of service? There is something inside me, but what can it be? You cannot always tell what keeps you confined, what immures you, what seems to bury you, and yet you can feel those elusive bars, railings, walls. Is all this illusion, imagination? I don't think so. And then one asks, my God, will it be for long? Will it be forever? Will it be for eternity? And I think this is just such a heartbreaking and honest way of like trying to describe what that feels like when you're struggling with mental illness and you're just struggling and there's no help, there's nobody, especially back then, it's like 150 years ago, and there's no understanding. There's no, back then there were no resources. And I believe I read somewhere here that his father even threatened to lock him up in a mental hospital, though I'm sure that mental hospital is putting it nicely for what existed back then. But yeah, that was just very heartbreaking to read, and also very relatable as such a, I don't know, flimsy way to put it, or And I think anyone who's ever struggled with depression, anxiety, BPD, ADHD, anything can relate to that, and that's sad. I think if you're someone who wants to see what life outside of corporate is like for you, and if you're someone who has the social support to be able to take that decision for themselves and can afford to leave work or to leave the corporate job and make art and see what life is like outside of that for you, it's still really hard to make that decision even when you have the resources, because there's just so much stigma, so much social stigma, so much pressure around that. But I think one of the ways to do that is to just focus in these two areas. One is health and one is purpose. So health routines could just be, again, these things are so simple but hard to follow consistently, especially if you're someone who's ND. But things like waking up and sleeping at a regular time, getting enough sleep, getting enough hydration, water, walk, getting enough exercise, things like that can be really helpful, because especially if you're coming out of like years of working, that's the first thing that corporate kills, your health and your sense of purpose. So as for sense of purpose, if you don't really know who you are or what you love or what you want to do outside of work, there's a video I had made on tools for building self-knowledge and sort of connecting with yourself and figuring out who you are and what you love and making time for yourself and stuff like that. So check that out, I'll link it. But yeah, this could just look like making time for things that you envy that others do, things that you did as a child. Maybe it was music, maybe it was painting, maybe it was writing. And this is so much easier said than done, because when you do start to make time for yourself, there'll be these empty spaces where you don't know what to do with yourself, where you realize that you don't know that much about yourself because you've just been enmeshed in work culture for so long. But slowly you'll get the hang of it. And I do believe that creation is the antidote to so many of our other problems as well. So much of the negative self-talk that happens, so much of the inner monologues that don't stop, so much of the passive consumption that we do outside of work, just like being on our phones and scrolling but not getting anything out of it. And so I think just create, do the things that you did as a kid, do the things that you secretly dream of, that you talk to your friends of, that you wish you were good at, and you will probably suck at those in the beginning, like writing or painting or drawing, sketching, making music, directing a film, filmmaking. But everything starts out small, and through practice you get better at these things. There will be a lot of uncertainty, there will be a lot of what are people gonna say. I had like a stable career, I was going upwards, and I'm doing this, and is it even good? There are people in my field who are doing so much better than I am. The only solution is to just do it anyway. Do it despite all the thoughts that you have inside your head. Do it despite what others say or think. Take as much social support as you can, whether it's like-minded people, clubs, groups, your friends, family. Take a class, take a course, do the stuff that you've always wanted to get back to and that you've told yourself you'll do at some point in the future, but then the future just keeps getting delayed and postponed. So in line with that creativity, creation part, I am a man of passions, capable of and given to doing more or less outrageous things for which I sometimes feel a little sorry. Every so often I say or do something too hastily when it would have been better to have shown a little more patience. Other people also act rashly at times, I think. This being the case, what can be done about it? Should I consider myself a dangerous person, unfit for anything? I think not. Rather, every means should be tried to put these very passions to good effect. So again, I think everyone struggles with rocky emotions, especially if you're someone who's ND. That's quite often an overlapping symptom among many disorders, which is the sort of emotional ups and downs or outbursts or anger, and all of these emotions, all of them can just be channeled into making art, into figuring out why is it that you feel that passionately, what is it that you feel that passionately about, and you can also resolve that and try to work that out for yourself the more that you get closer to the heart of them through making art and through creating. So he also writes, but what is your final goal, you may ask? That goal will become clearer, will emerge slowly but surely, much as the draft turns into the sketch and the sketch into the painting through the serious work done on it, through the elaboration of the original vague idea, and through the consolidation of the first fleeting and passing thought. So yeah, keep doing it, keep practicing, keep going for it. There will be times when you leave the thing that you love for months, and then you'll feel the guilt, but you'll also be going through life and exploring other parts of life, other parts of yourself. You will be meeting people and having conversations, and you'll be getting ideas because you'll be experiencing life. So make note of those ideas, and whenever that inspiration comes to you, And then when you get back to writing or making your art, use those and come back to it, keep coming back to it, keep practicing, keep working on it. Because he also says one must not backslide, and once one has started to look at things freely and openly, one must not face about or stray. So this line, once one has started to look at things freely and openly, one must not face about or stray. I think there are moments in all of our lives when we're at work being yelled at by our bosses, or when we're like messing up for the millionth time, or like when we're wondering to ourselves, like, what am I doing? And does this have any meaning? Does this make sense? Why am I doing this? There are those moments of like when you realize with crystal clarity, I don't want to be doing this. I want to make art. I want to make that film finally. I want to write that book. Whatever that thing is, once you faced it, figure out how you're going to do it. Don't push that away because it seems like too big a project or it seems too different from the path you're on now, because it will keep coming back and pecking at you and gnawing at you. So you may as well face it and not stray and fret about once you've seen the truth of who you are, what you want to be. Like, don't stray, just get started. Also, about all of this, if you're someone who struggles with mental illness, okay, so the reason why I'm saying mental illness and neurodivergence, because people may prefer both terms or either. There was a time when I did not like saying the term mental illness, but like, of course, I have all of this strength and creativity and beauty, and you try to make meaning out of your suffering and the ways in which you've hurt people, and you try to figure out what life is, what you want, who you are, and all of that is fine. But there's also like the pain doesn't stop, you know what I mean? This is lifelong. If you're ND, it's pretty much lifelong, and you will have to, it's just waves. Your entire life is just going to be waves. You're going to keep coming back to the same thing in a new way or in the same way, those same emotional problems or mental problems. And I don't want it to be, it's almost like I don't want the creativity and the strength and all of that. It's almost like I don't want it to be forgotten that this is still something that is a struggle, something that is literally an illness. If there wasn't so much stigma around it, we would be able to call it an illness while also saying that the individual is neurodivergent. And both those things are true. And of course, there's so much, and I completely get why the term neurodivergence is used, because there's so much stigma, there's so much misunderstanding, not understanding, there's so much judgment. I don't know if I'm explaining this well at all, but I think that both things are true. I think that people are incredibly brave and strong and creative and emotional and sensitive and wonderful, and they also hurt other people because of their pain and their suffering. And then they figure out how to work it out, and they figure out how to get help and seek help and implement the tools they learn and all of that. And that kind of keeps happening over and over. Okay, I don't know if I've explained that well at all. But one of my last points is, if you're someone who's ND or struggles with mental illness, treatment and getting to the root cause and implementing the tools you learn in your life is so important. Because everything I've said, if you just leave your job and you start making art, you're still going to need to be consistent. You're still going to need to be, like, without this time external structure on you, you're still going to have to learn to regulate your emotions. You're still going to have to deal with and brave through the anxieties that uncertainty brings. So for all of that, we need the coping tools. We need, whether that's through DBT, CBT, ACT, all these different therapies. So I think this is something that he did not have access to. Obviously, not everyone does, and treatment is extremely expensive and there's so much stigma around it. But if you're someone who can afford treatment, then I think you owe it to yourself to do that for yourself. Final quote I want to read out is page 72. 1 second. One more second. Love this friend, this person, this thing, whatever you like, and you will be on the right road. But you must love with a sublime, genuine, profound sympathy, with devotion, with intelligence. And so the earlier quote I read out, when Van Gogh was talking about those elusive bars, railings, walls, the cage that like mental illness traps you in. Do you know what makes the prison disappear? This is what he wrote right after that. Do you know what makes the prison disappear? Every deep, genuine affection. Being friends, being brothers, loving, that is what opens the prison with supreme power by some magic force. Without these, one stays dead. But wherever affection is revived, their life revives. So yeah, what a beautiful man. What a heartbreaking, beautiful man. I'm trying to I think for the next couple of months, I will be reading this book, because it's almost like too much reading all of the letters at one go. either way, I think letters and poetry are something that you can't just like quickly read. You have to like read them, digest them bit by bit. But yeah, we have really lost light. Anyway, I don't know if this video helped at all or gave you any answers, or even if I was trying to give any answers. This is something that I'm struggling with myself right now. This whole question of work and making art and following your true calling, but at the same time you need money to live. It's just, there are no simple solutions, I guess. Yeah, it's fine. Whatevs. Anyway, thank you so much for watching till the end of the video. If you've stuck around so far, I am Hazel. This is my channel, Read Flag. This is where this is the introduction I should have been doing in the beginning, but it's fine. I make videos on art and life and philosophy and books and things. So if you like this video, stick around, check it out, whatever. And I hope you have a lovely day, night, evening, dawn, dusk, whatever. See you in the next one. Bye.